Chapter 1801, Second Abyssal Level, Spirit Sovereign. Wasn't it supposed to be the case that no one was able to reach the divine origin realm in the human world? What was going on here? The catalyst behind the mobilization of the Blood River Godslayer array was his arrival. In the Abyssal Plane, he was the ruler of the Second Abyssal Level, which placed him below only the Holy Lord in the entire plane. He was revered as the Spirit Sovereign by all Abyssal creatures. In all 108 levels of the Abyss, only 3 were occupied by only a single being each, and those were the top 3 levels. These 3 beings reigned supreme in their respective levels, and they were referred to as the 3 Abyssal Saints. Of course, the Holy Lord's authority was unmatched, and right below him was the Spirit Sovereign, who wasn't even just a quasi-god anymore. He already had 1 foot in the realm of godhood. If it weren't for the fact that the current Abyssal Plane couldn't contain so many godly beings, he would have already become a god. He was even more eager than the Holy Lord for the Abyssal Plane to devour the Douluo Plane, as even just a portion of the Douluo Plane's life energy would allow him to transcend to godhood. Due to the fact that he already had 1 foot in the door, he knew exactly what changes would take place once he became a god. He was the Holy Lord's right-hand man, and during the Holy Lord's stints of seclusion, he was the one overseeing the entire Abyssal Plane. As such, it was completely unexpected for a powerful being of his caliber to encounter a worthy opponent as soon as he arrived on the Douluo Plane. Yuna also had a grim look in her eyes as she looked up into the sky. If it weren't for the fact that she was restricted by the plane, the Spirit Sovereign would be no match for him, but the restrictions imposed upon her by the plane prevented her from returning to her full power, which meant that she didn't have absolute confidence in her ability to defeat this opponent. Furthermore, the 4 beings accompanying the Spirit Sovereign were also giving off extremely powerful auras. The Hornet Sovereign wasn't among them, and even the Black Sovereign was standing at the very edge of the group, which was an indication that the 5 of them were all Abyssal Sovereigns that ranked above the Black Sovereign. It was very likely that all of the most powerful beings of the Abyssal Plane aside from the Holy Lord had already arrived on the Douluo continent, and that was completely different from the situation that had transpired 6,000 years ago. This had undoubtedly been caused by the Blood River Godslayer array. The array posed a massive threat to the human army, and even without it, it would be a very difficult task for the human army to oppose such a formidable Abyssal army. How interesting. I must say, it's quite a refreshing feeling to encounter a worthy foe. Once I devour your power, I may be able to reach that level even before this plane is devoured. Following a brief period of astonishment, the Spirit Sovereign's eyes were now filled with excitement. Why don't you try me? Yuna challenged in a cold voice. Sure. The Spirit Sovereign said with a smile, and Yuna was struck by the feeling that she was looking at Tang Wuling at the side of his smile. Right at this moment, the Spirit Sovereign's eyes suddenly transformed into a pair of golden vortexes that released immense suction force. This was his soul-devouring ability. 2 of the Spirit Pagoda's powerful beings that were situated quite close to him both groaned in unison, and a wisp of white mist surged out of the tops of their heads, following which they instantly disintegrated into nothingness. Not only that, but all of the humans on the battlefield within a radius of around a kilometer also disappeared in the same manner. The wisps of white mist surged directly into the Spirit Sovereign's body, and Yuna's expression changed slightly upon seeing this as a rainbow tinge suddenly appeared in the silver light that was radiating from her body. She pointed her silver dragon spear directly toward the Spirit Sovereign, then shot forth toward him like a speeding arrow. Slaughter to your heart's content, my children. The Spirit Sovereign smiled as he stepped forward to meet Yuna, and the Abyssal army that was bowing in reverence just a moment ago immediately charged toward the human army again, as if they had been given shots of strong stimulants. Clang! The Spirit Sovereign's finger struck the silver dragon spear, and Yuna shuddered slightly from the impact, but the silver dragon spear's devouring power was also unleashed. However, golden light flashed from the Spirit Sovereign's finger, also forming a vortex that nullified the silver dragon spear's devouring power. Immediately thereafter, the light around his body suddenly began to warp, and a formidable spiritual explosion erupted forth. Even if Tang Wuling were in Yuna's place, he would have definitely been dealt a heavy blow by this attack. Thankfully, Yuna's forte was also her spiritual power, and the rainbow light around her also exploded right as she sensed her opponent's eruption of spiritual power. Elemental power and spiritual power clashed violently, causing the surrounding air to warp and twist. No one on the battlefield dared to enter a 1-kilometer radius of the site where their battle was taking place, not even the Abyssal Sovereigns. A clash of this level was not something that could be approached by ordinary beings unless they had a death wish. The 2 of them shot back in retreat in unison, and Yuna had clearly been forced back further than her opponent. In the next instant, the Spirit Sovereign conjured up several dozens of projections of himself, and a heavenly symphony rang out, causing Yuna's eyes to glaze over momentarily. This was divine caliber spiritual captivation. She was able to instantly identify what her opponent was doing, but that was only one thing. Resisting the attack was a different matter altogether. Her movements began to slow down, and memories of the past began to surface in her mind. The moments she had shared with him on the Sea God's Lake were the most unforgettable memories of her life. The time she had spent with him in Shrek Academy was the happiest time of her life. There was also that night of intense passion in the Douluo Empire. All of those memories were clouding her mind and striking at her soul. Meanwhile, a golden finger was silently approaching her glabella. A triumphant smile appeared on the Spirit Sovereign's face. He was fully confident in his own spiritual power, even though it still couldn't compare with the Holy Lord's spiritual power. They were at least of the same realm. Right as his finger was about to strike Yuna's glabella, her eyes suddenly lit up with scintillating radiance. The Spirit Sovereign's smile immediately faded upon seeing this, and he accelerated his finger to strike Yuna's glabella right away. However, it was also at this moment that a circular silver scale appeared on her forehead. The scale was glittering and translucent, and imbued with rainbow radiance. Upon coming into contact with the scale, the Spirit Sovereign discovered that not only could his abyssal power not penetrate through the scale was releasing a powerful suction force that locked his finger into place. At the same time, the tip of Yuna's silver dragon spear was on the verge of reaching his throat. All of this had happened extremely quickly, and it looked like the Spirit Sovereign was done for. However, it was at this moment that he displayed his fearsome power. Bright golden light radiated from his body, and it was as if he had transformed into a true god. In the next instant, he abruptly vanished, transforming into a golden vortex that diverted the silver dragon spear away before sweeping toward Yuna. A rainbow vortex was conjured up by Yuna, and the 2 vortexes clashed. The rainbow vortex was swept aside, but the golden vortex was also repelled, and the 2 of them separated once again. How did you shake off my spiritual captivation? This is impossible. You shouldn't possess the power to do this. The Spirit Sovereign yelled in a shocked and furious voice. If he had reacted just a moment slower back there, it was very likely that he would have been severely wounded. Was this woman really a human? Since when did humans become this powerful? He was unable to participate in the invasion 6,000 years ago, but he had gained a thorough understanding of the human race through the accounts of other abyssal creatures. By his understanding, all of the humans in this world should have been completely at his mercy, but it seems that the situation wasn't so simple. Chapter 1802, Arrival of the Twin Dragons. Meanwhile, the Western Legion was clashing with the Abyssal Army, and even with the assistance from the powerful beings of the Spirit Pagoda, the entire Legion has suffered heavy losses in a very short time. Kyangu Daiting was preoccupied by his battle with Ghost Emperor, leaving no quasi-god beings to oppose the Abyssal Army, and the human army was completely outmatched. Led by the Abyssal Mammoths, the Abyssal Creature Army was like a pride of lions that had entered a sheep's pen. Most of the Abyssal Evil Sickles were being kept at bay by the powerful beings of the Spirit Pagoda, but the other 4 Abyssal Sovereigns on the battlefield were completely unmatched. A string of blood-curdling cries began to ring out incessantly. The Black Sovereign's right hand was plunged deep into demonic maiden Douluo Li Munday's chest, holding onto her heart and devouring her life force. The fist Emperor Douluo was slowly turning into a dry corpse in the tight embrace of another Abyssal Sovereign, and the entire situation had already completely spiraled out of control. The enemies were far too powerful for the human army to oppose, and if it weren't for the fact that Yuna was able to oppose the Spirit Sovereign, the human army would have most likely already been crushed. However, how much longer would she be able to last? No one knew the answer to that. In reality, it had only been less than 20 minutes since the Abyssal Army had emerged, but in this short span of time, the Western Legion was already on the verge of being completely overwhelmed. Right at this moment, a long cry rang out across the heavens, and a massive streak of golden light shot forth from the distance. At the same time, a series of formidable auras descended from above before rushing toward the Abyssal Army. The reinforcements had finally arrived. As soon as the Abyssal Army appeared, Guanzi and Chenzenji immediately returned to the main control center to begin organizing reinforcements. The rest of the reinforcements were still on the way, but the most powerful beings among them had already arrived. Tang Wuling had sensed it as soon as Yuna's clash with the Spirit Sovereign had begun. There was a spiritual connection between the 2 of them, and he could clearly sense that she was facing an extremely formidable foe. Sensing her perilous situation, Tang Wuling immediately flew over to the Western Legion's encampment at full speed, and he was followed closely by the powerful beings of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. He quickly caught sight of Yuna and the Spirit Sovereign, and he also immediately sensed the latter's incredibly fearsome aura. He flapped his wings vigorously and arrived by Yuna's side as quickly as he could. Yuna had naturally also sensed his arrival, and her eyes wavered slightly at the sight of him. Are you all right? Tang Wuling asked in an urgent voice. Dou Yuna nodded gently in response. Only then did Tang Wuling cast his gaze toward the Spirit Sovereign, and he faltered slightly upon identifying the fact that the Spirit Sovereign bore quite a close resemblance to him. The Spirit Sovereign's eyes also lit up at the sight of him. Are you the human whom the Holy Lord proclaimed to be a threat to us? Looks like I failed to mimic your appearance accurately. I really do love how you humans look. The muscles on his face began to squirm and writhe as he spoke, and he instantly adopted an appearance that was completely identical to Tang Wuling. However, right after he completed his transformation, his expression changed slightly as he could sense the powerful auras of the people who had accompanied Tang Wuling to the scene. The Douluos instantly took control of the situation, temporarily forcing back the Abyssal Sovereigns to give the human army some respite. Yali caught Li Munjae's body, and as soon as she did so, she knew that there was no saving her. She was able to revive even people who had just passed away, but Li Munjae hadn't just lost her life, she had lost her entire life force as well. Her body had completely atrophied, and there were no cells capable of being revived. This was the nature of abyssal creatures. They devoured and devoured until there was nothing left. She cast her gaze toward the retreating Black Sovereign, and her eyes were burning with fury. A faint smile appeared on the Spirit Sovereign's face. How interesting. No wonder even the Holy Lord was being so cautious. No matter, we're not in a hurry. Once the array arrives, you'll all be completely at our mercy. For now, let's retreat. He waved a hand in a nonchalant manner as he spoke, and the Abyssal army immediately retreated like the receding tide. The powerful beings of the Abyss and the Holy Spirit cult immediately disengaged themselves from their battles, then returned to the Spirit Sovereign's side to face the human army. Tang Wuling was just about to set off in pursuit when Dou Yuna grabbed onto his arm before shaking her head at him. He immediately sensed something, and decided against giving chase in the end. The Abyssal army retreated even faster than they had come, and in what seemed like the blink of an eye, they had already completely departed from the battlefield. Wait for me, I'll be back very soon. With one final parting smile, the Spirit Sovereign departed. The air around him suddenly began to warp, and in the next instant, he and all of the powerful beings around him vanished on the spot. Only then did the immense spiritual pressure in the air completely fade. Following their departure, Dou Yuna swayed in an unsteady manner as she gave a pained groan. Tang Wuling hurriedly wound an arm around her waist to support her. Are you all right? Dou Yuna replied. I'm fine. I only sustained some slight spiritual trauma. That man possesses divine origin realm spiritual power. It had not been easy for her to shake off the Spirit Sovereign's spiritual captivation, and she was naturally unable to do so without sustaining some damage. Right at this moment, a furious voice rang out. Let go of her. Tang Wuling reflexively removed his arm from around Dou Yuna's waist, and in the next instant, a slightly disheveled Kyangyu's painting descended from above. He arrived beside Tang Wuling with a furious expression. Keep your filthy hands to yourself. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon hearing this, then turned his gaze toward Dou Yuna, but she merely lowered her head and didn't say anything. In that instant, Tang Wuling felt as if his heart had been impaled by something, and the pain left him unable to breathe. Let's go, Dou Yuna said in a quiet voice, then flew away into the distance. Kyangyu's painting aimed a vicious glare at Tang Wuling. I'm warning you, stay away from Nana. However, Tang Wuling didn't even hear him. His mind was completely preoccupied with Dou Yuna's earlier gesture. She had lowered her head to avert his gaze. She hadn't stopped Kyangyu's painting, and for the first time, she hadn't communicated with him using her eyes. Tang Wuling had always felt that her heart was on his side, but this was the first time that she had avoided him like this, and it made him feel as if he were going to lose her dot. It was exactly this feeling that filled his heart with excruciating pain. Down below, the entire Western Legion encampment was in ruins. Over half of the defensive infrastructure had been destroyed, and among those that remained, less than 10% were still functioning. During that brief battle, the Western Legion had lost 30,000 troops. That was a third of the entire Legion. Furthermore, a large number of mechas had been destroyed. Without any barrier to protect them from the enemy, their advantage in long-range artillery fire had been severely diminished. Everything had arrived too abruptly, and this was a complete disaster for the Western Legion. Chapter 1803, Spirit Pagoda Chairwoman Dou Yuna. Reinforcements from the Northwestern Legion and Central Legion arrived several minutes later, but what use were they going to be? The losses that had already been incurred couldn't be recovered. Dongxian stood atop his fierce wolf mecha, looking at the ruined encampment, and it was as if he had suddenly aged 10 years. If it weren't for his selfishness in trying to force the deployment of Eternal Heaven, the Western Legion wouldn't have been dealt such a heavy blow. However, there was no way to undo his decision. The reality was irreversible. A series of figures were being reported to him, further exacerbating his pain. The familiar faces of his brothers had ceased to exist, and the enemy had been far more powerful than he had anticipated. Kyanggyu Dongfang. As soon as the name surfaced in Dongxian's mind, his heart was filled with burning fury. It was Kyanggyu Dongfang who had convinced him to do this. His gaze scoured through the crowd, and he quickly caught sight of Kyanggyu Dongfang, as well as many powerful beings of the Spirit Pagoda. At this moment, they were all huddled in a circle, and within that circle lied the bodies of several dozens of Spirit Pagoda members, among which were several titled Douluos, all of whom had their life force completely devoured. Dongxian opened his mouth to say something, but ultimately couldn't bring himself to do so. If it weren't for the valiant efforts of these powerful beings from the Spirit Pagoda, over half of the Western Legion would have most likely already been wiped out. In particular, the image of Dou Yuna opposing the Spirit Sovereign was ingrained deeply in his mind. Only now did he realize that the stunning young woman who very rarely spoke during the meetings possessed such incredible power. She was even more powerful than Kyanggyu Diding. Kyanggyu Dongfang, we're going to impeach you. You have no right to continue as the Spirit Pagoda chairman. A sharp voice suddenly rang out, instantly attracting a lot of attention. Currently, Kyanggyu Dongfang was standing in front of the bodies of the Spirit Pagoda members, looking as if he had lost his soul. He was naturally aware of the severity of this incident. It was his decision that had brought disaster upon both the Western Legion and the Spirit Pagoda, and if it weren't for Dou Yuna's scintillating display of power, their losses would have most likely been at least doubled. Kyanggyu Diding's eyes were closed, but it could be seen that his body was trembling, and there was an expression of indescribable pain on his face. It was over for the Spirit Pagoda. Kyanggyu Diding was well aware of what this incident entailed. The Western Legion had always been the Spirit Pagoda's most important ally, yet they had completely screwed over this ally of theirs today. Regardless of how much the Spirit Pagoda had lost, the losses suffered by the Western Legion could only be more severe, and the Chief Commissioner of the Army Headquarters was undoubtedly going to be furious after hearing about this. Regardless of how wealthy the Spirit Pagoda is, it would only be nothing more than a soulmaster organization after losing the support of the military. Furthermore, the Spirit Pagoda was equivalent to the Kyanggyu family. Even before the Tang Sect and Shrek Academy's revenge operation, many dissenting voices had already arisen within the Spirit Pagoda, and the dissatisfaction against the Kyanggyu family was only going to be further exacerbated in the wake of this incident. Perhaps it wasn't entirely over for the Spirit Pagoda, but there was no way that the Kyanggyu family would be able to continue leading the organization. Kyanggyu Dongfang didn't try to shift blame to anyone else as he knew that there would be no point in doing that. He was still firmly of the opinion that everything he had done was for the Spirit Pagoda's sake, but none of that mattered. Who was going to listen to him? Kyanggyu Diding finally opened his eyes and sighed. All of this was caused by Dongfang, and he should be held accountable. I am also of the opinion that he is no longer fit to continue as chairman. Ever since the younger generation has risen up, Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect have gone from strength to strength. Perhaps it's also time for our Spirit Pagoda to follow in their example. He turned his gaze toward Dou Yuna as he spoke, and there was a complex look in his eyes. Kyangyu's Hanting was standing beside Dou Yuna, and he said with a hesitant expression, "Great-grandfather, I don't think I'm ready. Shut up. Get over here," Kyanggyu Diding ordered. Kyangyu's Hanting faltered slightly before making his way over to Kyanggyu Diding. He wanted to ask a question, but the cold aura emanating from Kyanggyu Diding's body made him decide against it. Kyanggyu Diding turned toward Dou Yuna and said, "I suggest making Vice Chairman Dou Yuna the interim Spirit Pagoda chairwoman, and at the conclusion of this battle, a new election will be held once everyone returns to the Spirit Pagoda. Are there any objections to this?" At the end of the day, Kyanggyu Diding was still a quasi-god and the most important figure in the Spirit Pagoda, so even if the Kyanggyu family were to fall, his words still held a lot of weight. Kyanggyu Dongfang shuddered slightly as he cast his gaze toward his father, but Kyanggyu Diding completely ignored him. Kyanggyu Dongfang opened his mouth to say something, only to swallow his words as a dejected look appeared on his face, and even his aura had completely sagged. Even now, he still didn't think that he was at fault, and he didn't know what he had done wrong, but this was the undeniable reality that he couldn't couldn't fight against. I concur, Leng Yaoshi said, casting her gaze toward Gu Yuna as she did so. I also concur, another elder said. Kaiyangyu's Hangting was completely stunned by this turn of events. He had thought that Kaiyangyu Daiding was going to pass the position of chairman onto him, but to his surprise, the one to be promoted was his fiancée instead. However, after a brief stupor, he immediately turned toward Gu Yuna with an ecstatic and entranced expression. Kaiyangyu Dongfang could only heave an internal sigh upon seeing this. Gu Yuna had hidden her powers extraordinarily well up to this point. While it was true that she was very young, there was currently no one more suitable than her to take over control. Ever since joining the Spirit Pagoda, Gu Yuna had experienced an unprecedentedly meteoric rise, but all of this had been brought to her by her own power and ability. In order to rise up the ranks quickly in the Spirit Pagoda, one's cultivation rank had to keep up, and during her initial period in the Spirit Pagoda, that had been the main driving factor behind her rise. Through her rapid progression in cultivation, she was able to climb to a very respectable position in the Spirit Pagoda at a very young age. However, what truly propelled her toward the core circle of the Spirit Pagoda was her successful development of Black Soul spirits. Even though she had only made some changes on the existing foundation, those changes had prevented the project from deviating from the right path, and the successful development of Black Soul spirit had completely revolutionized the Soul Power world, thereby significantly elevating the status of the Spirit Pagoda. In fact, this became the foundation that gave Kaiyangyu Dongfang the courage to plot against Shrek City. With the creation of these artificial Black Soul spirits, the Spirit Pagoda had essentially roped in the support of all high-grade Soul Masters. After all, it was currently virtually impossible to find 100,000-year-old Soul Beasts, and Soul Masters who possessed 100,000-year-old Soul Rings were exceedingly rare. Thus, 10,000-year-old Soul spirits had become the highest pursuit for the vast majority of Soul Masters. Times were now different from the ancient past. Back then, one would have to personally slay a 10,000-year-old Soul Beast to obtain a 10,000-year-old Soul Ring, and the risk involved was obviously massive. Now, 10,000-year-old Soul Rings could be bought with money from the Spirit Pagoda, so things were much safer and easier in comparison. In the wake of that breakthrough, the Spirit Pagoda earned an astronomical sum of revenue, and its influence and status were elevated considerably. It was also because of this that Gu Yuna had risen up to become one of the 4 spirit envoys so quickly. Chapter 1804, Success. Of course, her status as Kaiyangyu's Hangting's love interest and Leng Yaoshi's disciple also important factors behind her progression. After that, Gu Yuna continued to improve steadily in her cultivation, but under normal circumstances, Spirit Envoy should have been the highest rank that she was able to reach. The only way for her to rise further up the ranks would be to become a limit Douluo so she could inherit Leng Yaoshi's position as vice chairman in the future. However, the development of the Myriad Beast Plane significantly accelerated this process for Gu Yuna. The Myriad Beast Plane quickly became another massive source of revenue for the Spirit Pagoda and bound more high-grade Soul Masters to the organization. The development of the 10,000-year-old Soul Spirits and the Myriad Beast Plane had virtually elevated the Spirit Pagoda to the same status as the Spirit Hall of the distant past, and the allure they presented to Soul Masters was simply far too great. If it weren't for Shrek Academy's rapid resurgence, it was very likely that Soul Masters of the future would only know of the Spirit Pagoda. Just now, Gu Yuna had displayed quasi-god level at such a young age. Her power, achievements, and stunning appearance made her the most suitable candidate to inherit the role of chairman. Even Leng Yaoshi couldn't compete with her at this time as there was a massive gap between the contributions the two had made to the Spirit Pagoda. Kaiyangyu Dongfang had planned for Gu Yuna and Kaiyangyu's Hangting to get married so that in a sense, it could be said that Kaiyangyu's Hangting had played a role in her contributions to the Spirit Pagoda. He was confident that he could convince Gu Yuna to agree with this arrangement, but now, everything had spiraled out of control. At this point, Kaiyangyu Dongfang could only cling on to the hope that Gu Yuna and Kaiyangyu's Hangting would come together as they had physical relations in the past. If that were to happen, then the Kaiyangyu family wouldn't completely fall into obscurity. One core member of the Spirit Pagoda after another expressed their approval of Gu Yuna's promotion, and their voices were like daggers being driven into Kaiyangyu Dongfang's heart, leaving him in complete despair. It was true that he was selfish and conceited, but in his own eyes, he had dedicated his entire life to the Spirit Pagoda, and everything he had done was for the sake of the Spirit Pagoda. Of course, he also wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to reach godhood, but it seemed that it was all over for him now. The Spirit Pagoda had to give the army headquarters and the Western Legion an explanation, and he was going to be the scapegoat. Kaiyangyu Daiding took a deep breath to compose himself before turning toward Gu Yuna. Seeing as everyone has approved of this decision, what is your verdict, Nana? Gu Yuna's gaze settled briefly on Kaiyangyu Daiding before moving on to Kaiyangyu Dongfang, then Kaiyangyu's Hangting, and a faint smile appeared on her face as she nodded in response. All right, I'll do my best to live up to everyone's trust and expectations. I'll be sure to act in the best interest of our Spirit Pagoda. She agreed. Kaiyangyu Dongfang shuddered upon hearing this, and he plunged even further into the depths of despair. But what could he say at a time like this? There was nothing he could do to stop this. At this point, Tang Wuling and the others still hadn't departed, so they bore witness to the unfolding situation. Tang Wuling's eyes were slightly glazed over and disoriented. It seemed that not long ago, he had been studying with Gu Yuna at Shrek Academy. Back then, they had been so weak and insignificant, yet now, he was the Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master, while she had just become the Spirit Pagoda Chairman. Even though the Spirit Pagoda was completely dominated by Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect when it came to high-end power, the Spirit Pagoda was still the #1 Soul Master organization on the continent, regardless of whether it was in terms of resources or personnel. Was this the reason why Gu Yuna had always refused to be with him? Had she stayed at the Spirit Pagoda and by Kaiyangyu's Hangting's side just so she could climb to the position of chairman one day? Tang Wuling's hands balled up into tight fists as a surge of fury welled up in his heart. Gu Yue, I would have been willing to give up everything for you if you had just asked. I would have been willing to sacrifice everything had you agreed to be by my side. Are you really an ambitious woman? Is your ambition the true reason that's keeping us apart? Let's go. It looks like everything's settled down here for now, Yali said as she laid a hand onto Tang Wuling's shoulder. Tang Wuling shuddered slightly as he turned toward her, and Yali was met by a tortured gaze that was filled with complex emotions. Don't think too much. Everything will have to wait until after this battle, Yali consoled in a gentle voice. Tang Wuling nodded in response as he did his best to bottle up his emotions and compose himself. Indeed, everything would have to wait until after this crisis was averted. With the looming threat of the Holy Spirit cult in the abyssal plane, there was no time to think about anything else, not to mention that the threat of the Blood River Godslayer array was just on the horizon. Right at this moment, the ringtone of Tang Wuling's soul communicator sounded, and he reflexively accepted the call, upon which an excited voice immediately rang out on the end of the line. Wuling, I did it. Ha ha ha, I did it. I succeeded where even my parents failed. I did it. Ling Zichen was yelling like a madwoman, and listening to her voice, Tang Wuling was suddenly struck by a strong impulsive urge. He suddenly really wanted to rush over to Gu Yuna and tell her everything. He had always been so calm and steadfast, but in that instant, the last thing he wanted to be was calm. He even wanted to tell her that he would be willing to give her the positions of the Tang Sect Master and Sea God's Pavilion Master if she were willing to return to his side. He loved her so deeply, even though countless beauties around him had developed feelings toward him. His heart had never wavered. But could he really do that? He couldn't. Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect didn't belong to him, so he had no right to pass on his leadership roles to anyone. Furthermore, Gu Yuna was already the Spirit Pagoda chairwoman, and the gap between them seemed to have only widened. Right at this moment, Gu Yuna suddenly raised her head to cast her gaze toward Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling had been looking at her this entire time, so their eyes immediately met, and in that instant, Tang Wuling was met with an incredibly gentle gaze. He faltered slightly upon seeing this, and a faint smile appeared on Gu Yuna's face. This was a smile of consolation, but was also intermingled with other extremely complex emotions. Her smile seemed to be carrying the weight of the world. In that instant, Tang Wuling was struck by a sense of enlightenment that pierced through his pain and despair like a rave light. She hadn't done this for power, that wasn't her motivation. Tang Wuling was very sure of this as he had suddenly arrived at a realization. If Gu Yuna really were wholeheartedly fixated on ambition and a lust for power, then how had he fallen in love with her in the first place? Furthermore, the love they had for one another was something that had always been deeply cherished in their hearts and definitely couldn't be swayed by external factors. She wasn't that type of woman. Following this enlightenment came a sense of guilt and apology which he conveyed through his eyes, as if he were apologizing to Gu Yuna for doubting her. However, in that instant, he suddenly caught sight of a hint of profound despair deep in her eyes, and he couldn't help but also be struck by an indescribable sense of sorrow. What was she thinking about? Why was she so sad? Chapter 1805. We vow to live and die with the Legion. Tang Wuling's heartstrings instantly received a tug, but at the same time, he was struck by a peculiar feeling, which was that not only had they not grown closer through this shared gaze, they seemed to have only grown further apart. Let's go. Yali gave Tang Wulian a gentle tug, and they departed with everyone else from the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. At this point, Dong Xian had already recovered his composure, but he didn't say anything. Wu Guanzi had only given him a call, informing him that the Central Legion and Northwestern Legion would help him reconstruct some of the destroyed defensive infrastructure as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the Blood River Godslayer array was still advancing at a slow and steady pace, gradually drawing closer and closer. The sky was gradually dimming as night approached, and the atmosphere in the Western Legion was an extremely somber one. No matter how battle-hardened a unit was, morale would inevitably take a huge hit after over a third of their forces were lost, especially during such a short span of time. The enemy was so powerful that their confidence had been crushed, and the entire Western Legion was lost and dejected. Dong Xian was currently situated in the temporary control center that had just been built, and inside the control center were all of his most important subordinates. As for Spirit Pagoda representatives, only Gu Yuna was present. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for your help and support on behalf of our Legion, Dong Xian said to Gu Yuna. Regardless of what had happened, Gu Yuna was worthy of respect. If she hadn't kept the Spirit Sovereign occupied and allowed him to run rampant, then it was very likely that the Western Legion would have been entirely wiped out. Gu Yuna merely nodded in response. Dong Xian took a deep breath, then continued, I am deeply saddened by the loss of so many brothers, but now is not the time to be lamenting their passing. If I survive to the end of this battle, I'll hand myself over to the military court. It was my decision that resulted in this tragedy. However, I don't plan to go back. Unless the abyssal plane is completely forced back into retreat, I won't take a single backward step. I will fight till the bitter end, but I no longer have the right to ask you to do the same with me. He closed his eyes with a pained expression as he spoke. Don't say that, General. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today, and prior to the surprise attack, there didn't seem to be any fault in your decision. You did everything for the sake of the Legion and our brothers, and your decision represents the decision of everyone, so we should all be shouldering the blame together. Our fallen brothers won't blame, and nor will we. If you're going to fight to the end, then we'll do the same. We won't retreat. We must avenge our fallen brothers. The one who had spoken was a major general who was rather ugly in appearance, but there was a valiant spirit about him. All of the soldiers present rose to their feet in unison. We vow to live and die with the Legion. Their voices were all filled with vigor and passion, and none of them had hesitated for even a single moment. Tears immediately welled up in Dong Xian's eyes, and he also stood up as memories of the past flooded into his mind. On the first day he had joined the Western Legion, he had started as an insignificant private, and over the course of decades, he had accumulated accolades upon accolades, finally becoming the commander of the Western Legion. Furthermore, the Western Legion had been ranked quite low among the 8 major legions, but under his leadership, it had risen to its current status. It could be said that his presence was felt throughout every corner of the entire Legion. All of his subordinates in the control center had been nurtured by him, and the Western Legion was extremely unified. It was always in times of peril that true loyalty shone through, and in this instant, Dong Xian felt like everything he had given and sacrificed for the Western Legion was worth it. All right, then we'll live together and die together. For the Federation! For the Federation! Everyone roared in unison. Soon, the Central Legion and Northwestern Legion began to converge toward the Western Legion. As a precautionary measure against a potential surprise return from the enemy, the two legions had each deployed a third of their troops to the Western Legion. Meanwhile, everyone from Shrek Academy and the Tang sect was gathered around the secondary tree of life, waiting for the moment of truth. Ling Zichen was currently standing beside Tang Wulian, and even now, her eyes were still filled with irrepressible excitement. The modification of Eternal Heaven was a success. She had already recovered from her exhaustion with the assistance of the secondary tree of life, and her heart was brimming with excitement. If Tang Wulian hadn't insisted that she keep this matter a secret, she would have most likely been unable to hold back her urge to tell the entire world. That's right, Tang Wulian had decided not to spread this information, and it was a decision that he had arrived at after communicating with Wu Guanzi. There were clearly spies in the Western Legion or the Spirit Pagoda. Otherwise, how had the Abyssal Army grasped the timing so perfectly? If it weren't for Gu Yuna's unexpected display of power, there was a very good chance that the defensive line would have already crumbled. Thus, the only ones aware of Eternal Heaven's successful modification were Tang Wulian, Wu Guanzi, Gao Daja, Zhang Xin, and a select few others. Currently, the human army was facing virtually the worst situation possible with the exception of the Holy Lord descending onto this plane. The Spirit Sovereign, whom Gu Yuna had only just barely managed to hold back, was already infinitely approaching godhood. Aside from him, there were also many sovereigns on the battlefield, as well as the enormous Abyssal Army. The most difficult period of this battle was about to arrive, but it would also bring an opportunity for them to strike back at the Abyssal Army. At the main control center, the Sea God Legion, North Sea Legion, and East Sea Legion, prepare all of your long-range artillery shells, including soul missiles, and lock onto the position 30 kilometers away from the Western Legion's defensive line. Then await further orders. Wu Guanzi was currently issuing one order after another with a serious expression. Chen Xinji was currently standing beside him, and neither of them had gotten a wink of sleep this entire night. They were waiting for what was very likely going to be the final moment in this battle, where triumph or defeat would be decided. The atmosphere inside the control center was extremely tense. The federal parliament had just issued an order for Wu Guanzi to do as he saw fit on the front lines. Their only objective was to keep the enemy from reaching further inland, and they were to do this at all cost. The Southern Legion was currently picking up the pace, and it would take them one more day at most to arrive. After receiving authorization from the federal parliament, the first order that Wu Guanzi issued was that anyone who dared to retreat would be executed on the spot without being granted a trial in the military court. The human army currently numbered in excess of 1 million troops, but would it be enough to stop the Abyssal Army? No one knew the answer to that question, not even Wu Guanzi himself. The Blood River Godslayer array is 40 kilometers away. It's about to reach the designated strike zone. An advisor's report rang out, and the tension in the air was heightened to a peak. Wu Guanzi raised his hand, and as he dialed a number on his cell communicator, his hand was trembling slightly. As a limit Douluo, this was something that had never happened to him before. Sect Master Tang, is everything ready over on your end? Everything is ready to go. All right, then I'll be counting on you. The Blood River Godslayer array is currently situated 40 kilometers away from us. You can make the final preparations now. Copy that. After ending the call, Wu Guanzi took a deep breath before issuing another urgent order. All warships and artillery shells are to go to Defcon 1. Lock onto the target and await my orders. Ling Zichen's mecha was slightly different from before. There was now a red rhomboid gem on its chest, creating a nice contrast with her pink mecha. Chapter 1806, Artillery God, Human Weapon. We are now entering Defcon 1. I repeat, we are now entering Defcon 1. Lock onto the target and await further orders. The sound of swiveling soul tools rang out across the entire northern front. Many long-range artillery units from the 3 naval legions had surfaced on the sea, and all of them were aimed toward the distance, silently waiting. Everyone was waiting for the arrival of the critical moment, the one that would perhaps decide the survival of the human race. Dong Xian was currently situated at the very front of the Western Legion's defensive line, and his fierce wolf mecha was as eye-catching as ever. At a time like this, only by leading from the front could Dong Xian raise the morale of the Western Legion. He was prepared to use his own blood to wash away the grave error that he had made. He raised his hand and dialed a number on the military communicator he wore around his wrist, and his call was almost instantly answered. This is Wu Guanzi speaking. Old Manu. Dong Xian's voice was a little shaky as he spoke. What do you want? I have to get back to work, Wu Guanzi said. Dong Xian continued. We've been fighting and bickering for decades, and I've never been willing to submit to you. I've never felt like you were better than me. You simply hit the jackpot with your upbringing. I had to work countless times harder than you to get to this point, but our feud ends here today. I still don't think you're better than me, but I have a request to make. Go ahead, Wu Guanzi prompted. After I die, don't put my name on the pillar of shame, Dong Xian requested. Wu Guanzi was silent for a moment before replying. Dong Xian, you fucking better come back alive. Ha ha ha, you know me. The old fierce wolf won't die that easily. Dong Xian ended the call before jumping into his fierce wolf mecha, and as he did so, the mecha closed before opening its eyes, which gave off an intimidating gleam. Listen up, brothers of the Western Legion. This is Dong Xian speaking. No one is to take a single backward step, and I'm going to lead the way. As soon as he finished this declaration, his fierce wolf mecha sprang up into the midair, arriving at the very forefront of the Western Legion's defensive line. In the main control center, Wu Guanzi clenched his fists tightly as he murmured to himself, Old man Dong, you've always been the man I've looked up to the most. You're right, if it weren't for my upbringing, I wouldn't have achieved as much as you. Chen Xinji patted him on the shoulder, and said, if both of you survive this battle, I'm sure you'll become good friends rather than rivals. Wu Guanzi smiled, and replied, I'm also sure of that. 35 kilometers. The advisor declared. Ugwanzi arrived before the large screen and stared intently at the advancing Blood River Godslayer array on the screen. His entire body was completely tensed up. Right at this moment, the powerful beings of Shrek Academy and the Tang sect began to rise up into the air, and from their positions, they were also able to see the giant purplish black light barrier in the distance. Tang Wuling gave Ling Zichen a nod, and a serious look appeared on her face. Specks of pink light began to appear all over her body, and she was instantly encased in her divine grade mecha before rising up into the air on her own. Everyone, protect Zichen and prepare for battle. Tang Wuling yelled. The vast majority of people present didn't know what he was going to do, but they all followed his orders. Ling Zichen's mecha was slightly different from before. There was now a red rhomboid gem on its chest, creating a nice contrast with her pink mecha. Ling Zichen's mecha was slightly different from before. There was now a red rhomboid gem on its chest, creating a nice contrast with her pink mecha. Currently, the red gem was glowing brightly, and it suddenly flipped over to reveal a series of intricate metal parts that formed a stand, atop which sat a cannon barrel that was around half a foot in diameter and roughly 2 feet in length. Wuling, help me stabilize the barrel. Tang Wulin's expression changed drastically at the sight of this setup. You really are insane. At this point, it was clear to him what Ling Zichen had done. She had installed Eternal Heaven into her divine grade mecha, making it her mecha's main cannon. This thing was a ticking time bomb, and if it were to explode, not even a single cell of Ling Zichen's body would remain. Ling Zichen smiled and said, I didn't have enough time to do anything other than to make my mecha the stand for the weapon. Do you think Eternal Heaven is that easy to modify? Hurry up and position yourself behind me to help me stabilize the stand. The recoil is going to be very strong, so brace yourself. Everyone's reaction was much the same as Tang Wuling. This woman was using her own body as a battery for the most fearsome weapon that humanity had ever created. Cao Dada and Zhang Xin felt as if their hearts were about to leap out of their throats. Never did they think that Ling Zichen was insane to this degree. Essentially, she had transplanted Eternal Heaven into her mecha, and the core of her mecha was her body. So in a sense, she had become one with Eternal Heaven. She was a walking weapon of mass destruction. All scientists had a deranged facet to their personalities, but Ling Zichen's insanity had definitely far exceeded that of the vast majority of scientists. Setting aside how much danger she was exposing herself to during the fusion process, was she even going to be able to handle the energy eruption from Eternal Heaven as its battery? At this point, regardless of how stunned and dismayed everyone was, there was no choice other than to do as she instructed. Tang Wuling aimed a vicious glare at her before yelling, Everyone, retreat to 5 kilometers away. Let's go. She wound an arm across Ling Zichen's waist as he spoke, and the two of them rose up into the air together, opening up some distance between them and the secondary tree of life. Ling Zichen chuckled. Are you scared? Tang Wuling replied in an enraged voice. That's beside the point. How could you be so reckless with your own body? Ling Zichen replied. That's also beside the point. As a scientist, I care only about the success rate, and the option that grants the best success rate is to use my body as the battery. I dare say that my understanding of source positive circulation cores is unmatched, and that's the foundation of Eternal Heaven, except it's more advanced than what I had been researching. In order to modify it to transform it into a super weapon that can be used repeatedly, minor adjustments have to constantly be made to the source positive circulation cores, and some adjustments also have to be made during the firing process. I'm not a soul master, but my body already contains many source positive circulation cores, and I can only maximize my control over Eternal Heaven by making it part of my body. In doing so, the success rate compared with setting up the battery independently of my body has increased by 18.5%. Do you know what that entails? It means that the overall security will be raised by close to 20%, so there's no reason for me not to do this. Also, now that I've succeeded, I'm a walking super weapon. If you wouldn't be able to withstand a direct blast from me, ha ha ha, from now on, I'll be the artillery god of our Tang sect. The fury in Tang Wuling's heart gradually faded as he listened to her excited speech, and it was replaced by a special emotion. For science and research, this woman had given everything she had to give. She wasn't even purely human anymore, and she had done all of this for the sake of Tang sect and soul technology. Chapter 1807. You are the pride of the Tang sect. What's up? Why aren't you saying anything? Ling Zichen asked with a smile. Zichen, you've sacrificed too much. Tang Wuling sighed. Ling Zichen's smile suddenly vanished upon hearing this. Tang Wuling couldn't see her face behind her mecha's visor, but he could sense the shift in her emotions. You must think I'm a monster, right? Some kind of mad woman. Ling Zichen said in a cold voice. Tang Wuling shook his head in response. Not at all. I've never thought of you that way. In my heart, you're a scientist who's worthy of respect. You've given so much for your pursuit, and you're the pride of the entire Tang sect. But I'm also a woman, and I also desire what normal women want. Even though I only think of those desires very occasionally, I'm still a woman. She suddenly began to choke up with sobs, and her drastic mood swings left Tang Wuling at a complete loss for what to do. All of a sudden, Ling Zichen screamed. Prepare to fire the Eternal Heaven cannon. Tang Wuling, stabilize the battery. Tang Wuling's heart jolted upon hearing this, and specks of golden light quickly appeared over his body as he donned his forward battle armor. At the same time, his battle armor transitioned into a liquid state and connected itself securely with Ling Zichen's mecha. He was holding Ling Zichen from behind, and at this moment, it was as if the two of them had completely fused as one. The silver cannon barrel was slowly aimed toward the purplish black light barrier in the distance, and in that instant, it was as if the very air had solidified. The slowly advancing Blood River Godslayer array was a harbinger of doom for the entire human race. Ling Zichen pursed her lips tightly to forcibly hold back her own tears, and specks of light appeared all over her body as one source positive circulation core lit up after another, generating an enormous amount of power. A series of halos lit up on her mecha's chest. Those were a string of source positive circulation cores, and they were connected in a brilliant configuration, releasing an unprecedentedly fearsome aura. Even though Tang Wuling had donned his suit of battle armor, his flesh still immediately began to crawl in the instant that those source positive circulation cores were ignited. His entire body began to tremble, and his heart was filled with an indescribable sensation that was a mixture of fear, excitement, anticipation, and above all else, determination. They had to destroy the enemy here in the northernmost region at all costs. They couldn't allow the Abyssal army to progress further inland. Inside the Blood River Godslayer array, one figure after another was emerging incessantly from the Abyssal passageway to join the Abyssal army, and all of them were top-tier beings of the Abyssal realm. Following the completion of the Blood River Godslayer array, the Abyssal plane was protected by the array, thereby shielded from the restrictive power of the Douluo plane. Countless powerful beings were rushing out of the Abyssal plane, appraising everything outside of the Blood River Godslayer array with greedy eyes, awaiting the moment that they could run rampant in this exuberant plane. This world was going to act as a stepping stone for them on the way to godhood, and they could even sense the abundant life energy within the plane beneath their feet. This was energy that they had been dreaming of for countless years. The Spirit Sovereign hovered in midair directly above the center of the Abyssal army with his hands behind his back, and he closed his eyes as he savored the moment. In the distance, the ravaged defensive line of the Western Legion was already visible. The Blood River Godslayer array was capable of eroding all things, and as soon as it bypassed this defensive line, the Abyssal army would be released to all corners of the world to deliver the purest life energy back to the Abyssal plane. Right at this moment, an indescribable sense of horror suddenly welled up in the Spirit Sovereign's heart. His spiritual power had already reached the divine origin realm, so he could immediately sense any threat to his well-being. He instantly raised his head and cast his gaze toward a certain direction. There, in the pitch black night, a tiny speck of light was visible in the distance. It was none other than this diminutive speck of light that was striking horror deep into his heart. What was that thing? In the next instant, all of the quasi-god level beings in the Blood River Godslayer array also raised their heads and turned their attention toward the same direction with stunned expressions. No one knew what the speck of light was, but all of them could sense a terrifying aura, as if the sky were about to fall on their heads. It's Eternal Heaven. We have to intercept it and keep it away from the array. Ghost Emperor exclaimed. The Holy Spirit cult was naturally aware of Eternal Heaven's existence. The Shrek City bombing had been conducted using 2 Godslayer missiles, and as one of the main perpetrators, Ghost Emperor could never forget that doomsday-like scene. However, even those 2 missiles completely paled in comparison with Eternal Heaven. This was a legendary weapon of the Federation. The spies of the Holy Spirit cult hadn't informed Ghost Emperor that Eternal Heaven had fallen into the hands of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy, so he was completely caught off guard by this development. Get Demon Sovereign to open the array right away and release us. The Spirit Sovereign yelled. Not only was the Blood River Godslayer array capable of keeping out all attacks, he also trapped everything inside unless the Overseer opened the array. Ghost Emperor immediately released his spiritual power to get into contact with Demon Sovereign deep within the Abyssal passageway. At this moment, the woman that was bathed in purplish golden light and situated on the giant altar opened her eyes. Standing beside her was another woman with shoulder-length hair, and her face was very pale as she stood on the spot with a listless expression. Eternal Heaven? So what? Demon Sovereign mused in a cold voice. The young woman beside her shuddered and implored, "Please stop this, mother, I beg of you. Do you really want to see the entire continent be destroyed by the abyssal creatures? We can't do this. This world nurtured us and gave us everything. You can't allow your hatred and desire to avenge father blind you. Shut up." Demon Sovereign slapped the young woman across the face, knocking her onto the ground. If it weren't for that person you let go, everything would be progressing even more smoothly. All humans must die to atone for your father's death. So what if the continent goes down with them? We'll be ascending to another world anyway. Only by becoming a god will there be a chance for me to find your father again. Only a god can attain the ability to create life. Blood was trickling out of the corner of the young woman's lips as she lay on the ground, but her eyes were filled with determination. But so many people have already died in your quest to attain godhood. We aren't humans, but humans are still living beings. So many of them have perished in your quest for revenge. You're going to be punished by the heavens for this. Ha ha ha. Why wasn't your father's killer punished by the heavens? So what if the heavens decide to punish me? The planar ruler of the Douluo continent has no physical form. Once I become a god, the planar ruler may even be at my mercy. So what if they're deploying eternal heaven? Let them do whatever they want. Ha 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 ha. Deranged laughter echoed throughout the abyssal passageway. At the same time, Demon Sovereign swept her right hand through the air, and a string of runes lit up, following which an opening appeared on the Blood River Godslayer array. Chapter 1808. Fire, Eternal Heaven. The Spirit Sovereign was already prepared, and he immediately swept a hand through the air, upon which the 4 sovereigns instantly rushed out of the array, heading directly toward the thread in the distance. However, it was also right at this moment that a cold look appeared in the tear-filled eyes of Ling Zichen. You think you can oppose the power of eternal heaven? During the modification process, she had already taken the firing time into account. As the most powerful Godslayer missile in existence, it would indeed take some time for eternal heaven to reach its target if it were launched as a missile, and there really would be a chance of the enemy to weaken it during its flight. However, it was no longer a missile. Come, you abhorrent bastards. Fire, Eternal Heaven. Ling Zichen yelled. Tang Wolin could feel that Ling Zichen's body had suddenly become extremely hot, and even through his forward battle armor, he could still clearly sense this scorching heat. In the next instant, the entire sky brightened, and a streak of dazzling white light shot out of Ling Zichen's chest. Tang Wolin was fully focused, and as soon as the cannon was fired, his battle armor began to ripple like water, absorbing the terrifying recoil of the explosion. Even so, he and Ling Zichen were instantly propelled up to an altitude of over 10,000 meters like a pair of cannonballs. Due to the extreme friction between the air and his battle armor, the latter had turned a scorching red color. The abyssal creatures that were rushing out of the Blood River Godslayer array were originally being led by the Black Sovereign, but she was suddenly struck by a sense of indescribable pressure, and she immediately stopped flying without any hesitation, allowing herself to rapidly plummet out of the sky in free fall. In the face of such lethal danger, any of the sovereigns would make the same decision to pursue self-preservation. This terrifying attack had come far too quickly, and all of the eyes of the human army were focused on this dazzling streak of white light that had lit up the entire night sky. Everyone looked on with bated breath, anticipating the moment the streak of light would strike the array. Success or failure, life or death, everything would be decided by this attack. Finally, the devastating attack arrived. Dong Xian was hovering in midair, preparing to lead the resistance against the Blood River Godslayer array, and he was completely rooted to the spot. He was also a limit Douluo, so he was naturally also able to sense the insanely fearsome power imbued within the streak of white light. Was it here? Was this it? All information regarding Eternal Heaven had been kept strictly confidential, so aside from Chen Xinji and Wu Guanzi, no one knew exactly when Eternal Heaven was going to be fired. However, Dong Xian's instincts told him that this was the Eternal Heaven that he had been waiting for this entire time. Furthermore, the attack had been fired from the Shrek Academy encampment. It had arrived just in the nick of time. Please, please, please succeed. In that instant, tears were streaming down his face. Over a third of the Western Legion's troops had perished due to an error on his part, but even then, he hadn't shed a single tear. However, in this moment, when hope had finally arrived, he was unable to hold back his tears any longer. His teeth had already bitten through his lower lip, and in that instant, countless chaotic thoughts surfaced in his mind. The lives of the entire human army, and perhaps everyone on the entire continent, hinged on this attack. This attack was their hope, and the hope of the entire Federation. Within the Blood River Godslayer array, the Spirit Sovereign vanished on the spot almost as soon as he caught sight of that flash of radiance. A look of astonishment surfaced in his eyes. With his divine origin realm spiritual power, he was extremely sensitive to all forms of energy, so he was able to clearly sense just how fearsome this attack was. Would the Blood River Godslayer array really be able to withstand it? Ling Zichen's entire body was completely numb. She had already lost control of all of her physical functions, and only her brain remained conscious. Her lips were moving, but she was unable to utter a single word. She could only formulate a single thought in her mind. Let Eternal Heaven purify this heinous Blood River Godslayer array. Finally, the white light shone down upon the giant purplish black light barrier, and in that instant, time, space, everything seemed to have fallen still. It was as if the entire Douluo plane had been put on pause, as if the planet itself wasn't even orbiting anymore. The Blood River Godslayer array stopped in its tracks, and everyone's eyes were focused on the point of impact. In that instant, everyone seemed to have lost all ability to think. Gradually, the white light faded, but the giant purplish black array still stood. Inside the Blood River Godslayer array, a look of extreme excitement appeared in Ghost Emperor's eerie green eyes. We did it. In the face of the mighty Blood River Godslayer array, even Eternal Heaven, all of a sudden, his words drew to an abrupt halt as he discovered that the spot where the Blood River Godslayer array had just been struck was suddenly lighting up. The purplish color had turned a radiant bright purple, and it was as if countless illusions had appeared on the surface of the array. A series of images appeared on the massive light barrier, depicting an immortal paradise that was filled with drifting ethereal clouds. At the same time, a voice rang out within everyone's hearts. Welcome to Eternal Heaven. Boom. An unprecedentedly massive explosion erupted, and the entire world trembled. The entire northernmost region was transformed into a sea of light, and all those with their eyes fixed on the point of impact were temporarily blinded by the scintillating light. An incandescent white mushroom cloud rose up into the air, transforming into a gigantic white halo that exploded in the sky. Tang Wolin and Ling Zichen were several dozens of kilometers away from the epicenter of the explosion, but in the next instant, they were flung back several dozens of kilometers further by the terrifying shockwaves. In the instant that the explosion had begun, a green light barrier had appeared to encompass the entire Tang sect and Shrek Academy encampment. However, all that the powerful beings of Shrek Academy and the Tang sect could see was radiant white light. All of them had thought about and imagined the power of Eternal Heaven, but this explosion had exceeded everyone's expectations. Dong Xian was chortling like a madman. He couldn't see anything, and his body was being flung through the air like a rag doll, but he was laughing to his heart's content. Upon witnessing the Blood River Godslayer array continuing to stand in the wake of the attack, his heart had completely sunk. However, in the next instant, the massive explosion took place, and he and his mecha were sent flying through the air. The shockwaves were so powerful that he had almost blacked out. He was situated closer to the explosion's epicenter than anyone in the human army, but that was still several dozens of kilometers away. Even so, the shockwaves still sent him flying like a cannonball. Chapter 1809, Long Live the Federation. However, he was laughing as he knew that the more powerful Eternal Heaven was, the greater the probability that all those bastards would be wiped out. Despite the power of the explosion, the human army was still far away from its epicenter, and the protective barriers of the defensive line were able to keep out most of the shockwaves. But what had become of the Blood River Godslayer array? It had taken a direct hit. The Black Sovereign and the other abyssal sovereigns had been slammed into the ground by the shockwaves like a series of nails, and their hearts were filled with horror. Was this the super weapon of the human race? Was this the destruction that the human race was capable of unleashing? They couldn't believe what had just taken place, but the truth was undeniable. Wu Guanzi had already issued an order to fire all long-range weapons, but upon witnessing that streak of dazzling white light, he knew that the order was completely pointless. Never had he felt such awe and horror. As a limit Douluo, he was already standing at the pinnacle of this world, yet only after the explosion ensued did he come to understand what true horror was. This was Eternal Heaven, the undisputed number one weapon in the history of the human race. It had been created a very long time ago, but it had been sealed away this entire time. What truly terrified him was that this weapon wasn't being controlled by the Federation. It was in the hands of the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. Two people who were even more terrified than he was were Kaiengyu Diding and Kaiengyu Dongfang. They were situated in the Western Legion's encampment, experiencing the tremors running through the earth and the unsteady wavering of the entire defensive line. They could see the doomsday-like explosion and hear the piercing alarm. Only now did they truly understand understand what eternal heaven entailed. 109th grade missiles, defense systems fit for space exploration. In the face of eternal heaven, all that was nothing more than a pitiful joke. If this attack had been aimed at the Spirit Pagoda headquarters, then everything would be erased from existence, even extending kilometers deep into the ground. Was this really something that had been created by humans? Yuna was also watching, and her face was completely pale. For the first time, she experienced what true destruction was, and this destruction had been created by humans. Humans were fundamentally different from gods, but could a god truly withstand an attack of this caliber? She had no idea, and no one could determine this. The all-consuming white light lingered for a very, very long time, and all those who were witnessing the explosion felt as if an eternity had passed by. Finally, they regained their hearing, and their sight gradually returned to them, allowing them to see the white mushroom cloud that was rising up into the sky, as well as the Blood River Godslayer array, which was looking like a gigantic smashed watermelon. In the wake of the explosion, the entire Blood River Godslayer array seemed to have solidified, and over two-thirds of it had disappeared, leaving behind the remnants of a charred purplish black dome. Over two-thirds of the abyssal army had also vanished, and a massive torrent of grey energy was surging into the abyssal passageway. Only some of the abyssal creatures at the very edge of the array were still alive, but even so, their bodies had been blown into pieces with dismembered limbs littered everywhere. Aside from the entrance to the abyssal passageway, which was concealed behind a cloud of dense mist, it could be seen that the ground within the array had turned into a dark red liquid that appeared to be molten lava. The ground had caved in by over 100 meters, and the scene being presented was like hell on earth. Everyone was struck by a sense of dryness in their throats, but all of a sudden, someone yelled in a hoarse voice, "Long live the Federation!" In the next instant, cheers began to ring out across the entire human army. Long live the Federation! Long live the Federation! Long live the Federation! The vast majority of them had no idea what had happened, nor what weapon had been used to create such a terrifying explosion, but they knew that the fearsome Blood River Godslayer array was completely and utterly destroyed. This was eternal heaven, the pinnacle of humanity's destructive capabilities. Dongxian struggled out of his fierce wolf mecha, which had been embedded into the side of a mountain, and as he caught sight of the scene in the distance, he also began to yell with all his might, "Long live eternal heaven! Long live the Federation!" Tears and snot were streaming down his face, but he didn't care. They had succeeded. The Blood River Godslayer array had finally been destroyed, alongside the majority of the abyssal army. Even though the destroyed abyssal creatures were returning to the abyssal plane as abyssal energy, such a massive number of abyssal creatures definitely couldn't be resurrected anytime soon, and that was all the time the human army needed to drive back what remained of the abyssal army. Zichen, are you all right? Tang Wuling called out in an urgent manner. He had naturally also witnessed everything happening in the distance, but the savior of the human army, Ling Zichen, had stopped breathing, and all of her vital signs had disappeared. Her body was like a machine that was completely spent and had shut down due to total energy loss. Tang Wuling held Ling Zichen in his arms, and her pink mecha had become completely dull and devoid of luster. Thus, Tang Wuling was in no mood to join in on the celebrations. He flew back like a shooting star to the Shrek Academy encampment and returned to the secondary tree of life. Under his guidance, rich life energy gushed into the pink mecha in a frenzy. Yali had also arrived by his side, and she immediately unleashed her Archangel's Holy Spirit dance. This was the ultimate resurrection technique, and if anything could bring her back, it would be this. Meanwhile, inside the main control center, Guanzi roared with all his might. Fire! Fire all weapons! One launch button after another was pressed amid the raucous cheers, and more violent explosions erupted in the northernmost region. Countless soul missiles and soul lasers fell like rain, and all of them had a single target. Without the protection of the Blood River Godslayer array, what remained of the abyssal army was about to face the full wrath of the human army. Everything was quaking violently, and thunderous explosions rang out across the entire northernmost region. Their plan had succeeded, and everything was looking bright and hopeful. As the barrage of artillery fire continued to rain down, a hint of white had already begun to appear in the distant sky. Dawn had arrived, so the sun was surely not far away. The human army was celebrating with all their might, celebrating the joy of just being alive. After issuing that final order, Guanzi slumped back into his seat. Staying up all night couldn't exhaust or limit Douluo, but extreme mental tension followed by utter relaxation was a 1-2 punch that could knock down anyone. And even Chen Zhenji's breathing had become quite rough and ragged. Chapter 1810, Ling Zichen's excitement. They did it. They are the heroes of humanity. Chen Zhenji proclaimed with tightly clenched fists. He was currently recalling what Long Yeyu had said to him prior to his departure from Shrek Academy, and his heart was filled with radiant passion and hope. Everything seemed to be progressing in a positive direction. All of a sudden, something seemed to have occurred to Guanzi, and he yelled, "Wan Yun! Wan Yun!" Jiang Wan Yun was also in the main control center, and he was just as ecstatic as everyone else. He had spent the majority of his life fighting against the abyssal plane, but never had he witnessed so many abyssal creatures being wiped out at once. "I'm here, Commander," Jiang Wan Yun said as he arrived beside Guanzi before extending a military salute. "The rest is up to you now, old man Jiang. Once we force the abyssal army into retreat, set up the blood god array right away to seal the passageway. We can't give them any chance to come out again." At this point, Guanzi had regained some of his composure. The initial objective for the battle had been successfully achieved, and now, it was time to seal the abyssal passageway and permanently keep the abyssal creatures out of this world. He didn't know how much damage that attack from Eternal Heaven had caused to the Holy Spirit cult, but the best case scenario would obviously be the death of all of the Holy Spirit cult's evil soul masters. Rest assured, we've already made the preparations. Once the abyssal creatures are cleared away, we'll be able to begin setting up the blood god array immediately. As for the resources required, we'll require your assistance for that. We'll do everything in our power to cooperate with you. Guanzi replied without any hesitation. Jiang Wanyun smiled, as did Guanzi, and both of them felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from their shoulders. At this moment, a silver figure appeared on the battlefield, flying directly toward the abyssal passageway as a streak of silver light. The storm of artillery fire didn't slow her down in the slightest, as she was always able to accurately evade the artillery shells that were on course to strike her, as if she could see into the future. In the next instant, she plunged headfirst into the artillery fire and straight toward the vast cloud of abyssal energy in the distance. This silver figure was naturally none other than Yuna. Her silver dragon spear was glowing with dazzling light, and all of the shockwaves from the explosions were being kept at bay by the rainbow energy around her body. There was no better time than now to devour abyssal energy. So many abyssal creatures had been killed, among which many were extremely powerful, creating an enormous amount of abyssal energy to be devoured. Sure enough, as soon as Yuna approached the epicenter of the explosion, she clearly felt her silver dragon spear become scorching hot, and a tremendous rush of energy entered her body in a frenzy. However, she didn't pay any heed to all of this as there was one question in her mind. Why wasn't he here? Surely he wouldn't miss out on such a fantastic opportunity. With Tang Wuling's power and ability to grasp opportunities, Yuna was confident that Tang Wuling wouldn't miss something like this. That attack from Eternal Heaven had killed countless abyssal creatures, and there was no lack of abyssal emperors and sovereigns among them, so there was no better opportunity than this one. As for the storm of artillery fire, that wouldn't pose any threat to his forward battle armor. Beneath the secondary tree of life, the visor of the pink mecha was slowly lifted, revealing Ling Zichen's pale face. She was currently completely paralyzed, but the excitement in her eyes was clear to see. Tang Wuling heaved a long sigh of relief upon seeing this, and he asked in an urgent manner, "How are you feeling?" Ling Zichen's voice was slightly feeble and hoarse as she asked, "Did we succeed? Did we manage to destroy the Blood River Godslayer array?" Tang Wuling hurriedly nodded in response. "We did, so rest easy. On top of that, a massive number of abyssal creatures were killed. We succeeded." "No, you succeeded." A wide smile appeared on Ling Zichen's face. "We really did it. And I didn't die. I thought I was dead for sure. I had at least 30 broken bones in my body, and I thought I was done for, but it's all worth it. Also, even more importantly, I was able to verify one of my hypotheses. I really didn't want to admit it, but it looks like I have no choice now. Don't talk. Conserve your energy and rest. With Mother here, you won't be able to die even if you wanted to," Tang Wuling said. Ling Zichen shook her head as she withdrew her divine braid mecha amid a flash of pink light, then raised her hand, only for it to fall back down in a limp manner. "Wuling, please keep a record of what I'm about to say next. I don't know if I'll be able to live until the end of this battle, and I just had an extremely important epiphany that needs to be recorded in text and sent back to the Tang sect headquarters. This is going to be an invaluable treasure for our Tang sect, and through it, I can see the future. The future." Cao Dajia asked, what do you mean by that? Ling Zichen's eyes immediately lit up, and in that instant, it was as if she had turned into someone else, as if those injuries on her body didn't even exist. Yali hurriedly increased the rate of injection of holy energy into her body, fearing that she was experiencing terminal lucidity. With her support and the constant injection of life energy from the secondary tree of life, Ling Zichen was immediately reinvigorated. I fused eternal heaven with my mecha as I wanted to conduct a very important experiment, one that can only be conducted by me. I've already sent the records of the experiment back to the Tang sect, and all highly authorized members will be able to view it. Back when I first began studying eternal heaven, I quickly discovered that it was a very intriguing creation due to its structure. I discovered that eternal heaven is indeed comprised of source positive circulation cores. This is something that I've been constantly researching. I am also able to create source positive circulation cores, and they're even better than the source positive circulation cores made during the era of eternal heaven's creation. However, I'm able to control one core easily and install several cores into a sole tool, but I've always been stumped by the problem of how to create synergy between cores, thereby resulting in an effect that's superior to the sum of the constituent parts. This is definitely possible for source positive circulation cores, but whenever I've tried it, I've almost always been met by a huge explosion. However, the more it exploded, the more I was convinced that I was going in the right direction. If we can harness and control this power and prevent it from exploding, we'd be able to create even more powerful soul tools. I was convinced that this was correct, and I've always been working toward this goal. However, my research wasn't able to yield a satisfactory answer. I was unable to fuse the cores. I've already been able to fuse several source positive circulation cores on an elementary level to generate a slight qualitative change, but that was it. Everything changed when I got my hands on Eternal Heaven. Eternal Heaven is truly a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, and the most important inspiration it provided me with was related to the fusion of source positive circulation cores. Do you know what I saw when I removed the shell of the missile? I saw a huge number of source positive circulation cores interconnected with one another, synergizing with one another, and the system could be activated at any moment to generate a terrifying qualitative change. Once this qualitative change took place, all of the cores would explode in unison to devastating effect. So how were these cores connected? They were connected through meridians. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.